Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Winfree, and what you're about to listen to is an old episode of a podcast I used to host called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. In point of fact, this was the second to last episode of this show that I ever did live. Um, I had to say that because there was technically a re-air of one of the ones we did earlier, so it's aired twice on the feed, and that came out after the last one. But this one originally aired November 13th, 2015, and I'm trying to remember the timeline, but there was some stuff in my personal life. This was either around the time my grandfather was diagnosed with cancer or the 1 year anniversary of his diagnosis, and he passed fairly quickly after the diagnosis. Just some adverse reaction to the chemo, and it passed, man. We got the diagnosis in November, and he passed end of January. Um, and that really, I was very close with my grandfather, and that took a lot of the steam out of my desire to talk about to do the show. So this was the last one for about a year. I brought it back. And this episode has already been re-aired because we have not re-aired these in chronological order, but I brought it back October of 16 for the Treehouse of Horror special. I did a one of with Benjamin J. Cologne because I had promised him. And it was a good show. That one's been re-aired. Please give it a listen. But I did Everyone Loves a Bad Guy for a couple of years, and I did it until, kind of as the phrase goes, until it was time to be done doing it. Yeah, this is one of the last ones. It's the last one that we'll be re-airing as we re-air them. It's again almost the last one chronologically. This is myself and Jayson Teasley, now of Mosaic Media, talking about movie monsters. So a lot of King Kong and Godzilla, a little bit of discussion about the xenomorphs, the the predator creature, some of just movie monsters rather than uh, so again just movie monsters. There's a weird distinction to be made between monsters and like giant animals in some cases, and actually a debate within the Godzilla community about whether or not Godzilla should have ears because if he's more a lizard, he doesn't have ears, but if he's more a monster, he does because lizards don't have ears in the kind of traditional sense of, humans having ears. So, or not just humans, like mammals have ears. But anyway, neither here nor there. Thank you very much for listening. It's been a trip going back to some of these old shows, listening to them, editing them down, and kind of recording these new intros for them. So thank you very much. It has seriously warmed my heart to know that some people still listen to some of these old shows, or that there's kind of a life for them here at this point. Um, so thank you, sincerely, thank you. Doing podcasting is a little bit like screaming into the void, and knowing that there's someone out there listening, there's someone out there that sort of cares in theory. Um, it means a lot. And this was my baby. I haven't. I inherited the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast from Mark, and Mark and I do Damn You Hollywood, and I love those shows. Don't get me wrong, but when I say this was my baby, like Mark and I kind of jointly decided to do movie reviews, and we kind of have evolved that show as time has gone on. And again, I inherited the MMA one, which I still do because I love MMA and I love talking about it. But my Everyone Loves a Bad Guy was mine. That was my concept. That was my vision, for want of a better word. And going back through part of my history and something that I cared a great deal about at the time. There's some episodes that are not as good as others. I don't mind saying that. But it's been heartwarming, and it's a nice reminder that sometimes um, chasing something down like that, putting yourself out there in that respect is not always the worst thing in the world. You don't always get kicked in the teeth for it. So, thank you. And this is the last one of these that I will do because this is the last one we're re-airing. So, The last one I'm recording re-intro for. I think there's a couple of others that might still come after this, depending on when Mark has moved them around, so forgive me. But whatever order you happen to be listening them in, you found the end. You have reached the end of my going back through them and re-recording and re-editing. So thank you very, very much. And as always, I hope you enjoy the show.
When the devil is too busy and debt's a bit too much, they call on me by name, you see, for my special touch. To the gentlemen, I'm misfortune. To the ladies, I'm surprise. But call me by any name, anyway, it's all the same. I'm the fly in your suit, I'm the pebble in your shoe, I'm the bee beneath your bed, I'm the bump on every head, I'm the heel on which you slip, I'm a pin in every head, I'm the thorn in your side, makes you wiggle and writhe. And it's so easy when you're evil. This is the life you see, the devil tips his hat to me. I do it all because I'm evil, and I do it all for free. Your tears are all the pay I'll ever need.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. I'm your host, Robert Winfree. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being here. You know, I understand time is the only currency we have that really, truly means anything. And you've all chosen to, spend some of your time here with me on this show, and I really can't express to you how much that means to me. Because, otherwise it's just me rambling to myself. And look, if I wanted to be that crazy, I could have myself committed. It wouldn't be that difficult. Before we get going tonight, this is being broadcast live. For anyone listening after the fact, this is being broadcast live and consequently recorded for your viewing, if you're listening pleasure at a later date, on the Friday the 13th of 2015. And as I'm recording this, I believe there have been a series of terrorist attacks throughout France, I believe specifically in Paris. And it's just one of those things that every now and then makes me, feel a little bit weird about doing a show called Everyone Loves a Bad Guy. Because, I don't talk about real people on this show, with one exception. I had Mark Radulich and Pat Mullen on, and we talked about promoters, specifically in the areas of boxing, mixed martial arts, and professional wrestling, and just, the goods and the bads of it. And that's the only time I've ever really brought up real people on this show. And because there are truly, evil human beings out there who, for some reason, think it's okay or justified or within their purview to authorize, something like this. There are people out there dying. That's not an exaggeration. That's not hyperbole. And I've heard conflicting numbers, and a lot of this is happening very nearly in real time. So I'm not going to spout numbers because I've seen some very different figures, and I'm not going to get into specific numbers as far as that goes because I don't know. But I talk about this as it pertains about bad guys and villainy, as it pertains to narratives, and why it's important for stories to have villains. At the end of the day, it's important for the hero, whoever your hero happens to be, to overcome them. And that's a sadly overlooked and deeply important part of the narrative of the story, the culture of storytelling. And this is one of the things that has bothered me about a lot of movies, specifically horror movies over the last few years. They just seem intent on ending with a twist or the hero doesn't win. And I fundamentally believe it is important for the hero to win in a story, because you have to understand what goes into storytelling. It's part of what we pass on. It's part of what goes into our culture, what we, our peers, our children. The stories we tell inform parts of their worldview, and it is fundamentally necessary that we foster a culture not only of heroes triumphing over evil, but of understanding what, true evil is. True evil is not easy to describe. It is not easy to qualify, quantify. It doesn't fall necessarily along racial or religious or economic lines. It's in a lot of ways, it's either inbred within us or it's taught to us by our society. And the other thing I want to say about this, please, for my own personal sanity, do not refer to what's going on as a tragedy. Tragedies are, by their nature, I think, preventable. That's what makes it a tragedy. It could have been stopped. Attacks like this are not tragedies, they are atrocities. And there's a world of difference between. And on that note, that's going on right now. I just had to get some of that off of my chest. It would be disingenuous not to mention it, I think. On the plus side, very small, consolation to, certain people, but I'm not going to, even if something like this were happening in America, in my country, I don't think I'd stop. I think I'd still do this show, unless I was under fire personally. I'm just not gonna, allow people like that with those kinds of goals, those miserable, small-minded, violent sociopaths to influence how I live my life if I have any say over the matter. And last I checked, I still do. But tonight we are talking about a very, in some ways, silly topic, and being a little bit lighthearted after, a serious introduction there is probably a good sake of this show. We're talking about movie monsters tonight, and thankfully I am not alone. I mentioned I was doing this. Jayson Teasley said he'd be happy to come on and talk about it with me, kill an hour, and, maybe bring some entertainment to the rest of the world. So he's the host From the Cheap Seats every Thursday here on the Rattleton Broadcasting Network. Jayson Teasley is here with us. Jason, sorry Skype's being such a pain in the ass.
Yeah, Skype is definitely a pain in the ass. I want everybody to just keep raspy voice and everything. I'm not feeling the best. Haven't been feeling the best for about a week, so please excuse my raspy 1980s smoker voice. But yeah, I was able to finagle the Bluetooth on my phone to get it working, so I could just call in directly from my phone, and I'm glad to be here as always.
I'm glad to have you again. In some cases, contrary to the numbers, I think for a long time my highest rated show was the one I did by myself about Hannibal Lecter a few years ago. But I prefer having, other people on here to have conversations instead of just dissertating. And it's more interesting. So thank you for being here.
I don't bring much, but I bring what I can.
That's all you can ask. All right. Let's start off with, there's no better place. There are a few shows I plan on doing in the future. I've got to get, at some point in the near future, I've got to get on, first of all, video game villains, because I haven't touched that yet. Benjamin J. Cologne might, throw something at me if I don't get to Stephen King villains soon enough, and believe me, I'll throw something at myself, too, because I'm a big fan of Stephen King's. And one of the things that I haven't gotten around to just yet is specifically the Godzilla movie, because they're kind of their own entity. And I absolutely want to talk about them because the kaiju kind of subgenre there really fascinates me on a lot of levels. But we can't talk about movie monsters in this sense. In the large, kind of again, I don't, because, the Frankenstein monster, vampires, werewolves, these are all technically movie monsters. But for the purposes of this, I want to try and keep them to the non-intelligencers, which I think is a much more interesting kind of subset. So we're going to be talking about those, and you can't talk about these things without Godzilla. I mean, that just has to be part of the discussion. He and King Kong are, 1 and 2, and I firmly believe that Godzilla has earned his title King of the Monsters, much more so than King Kong, though some of that might have to do with Peter Jackson deciding that he needs a 3-hour movie to tell the story of Kong and pace it terribly. I actually like that movie, but man, Peter Jackson, come on, man. You can do better. So, Jason, I know how I got exposed to Godzilla for the first time. So, do you have any, stories from your childhood or even your contemporary life that deal with the King of all monsters?
The way I got introduced to Godzilla was, I'm pretty sure the same way most people maybe my age got introduced, is a little network called USA. USA was notorious to play Godzilla movies, especially like Godzilla, King Kong, Mothra, movies like that. You would always catch either on a late Saturday night or going into early Sunday morning. And, growing up, I didn't watch TV much unless it was really late at night or if I was sick or something and, couldn't sleep. So I got exposed to it because I would be up sick or maybe didn't have school the next day, and I would be flipping the channels and I would come across a Godzilla movie or a King Kong movie or King Kong versus Godzilla on USA because it was notorious to love to show that. And as a young kid who doesn't like giant monsters terrorizing everything that looked it didn't have the greatest, let's say, special effects. But at 8, 9 years old, a giant monster, you didn't really need much. It just looked cool. So I actually had a 2-foot-tall Godzilla toy that I later found out that was worth a lot of money, and I kind of destroyed it when I was younger. But you buy toys to play with, not to keep in boxes. But yeah, I mean that was how I got introduced to Godzilla.
I can vividly recall
growing up.
Now, I can vividly recall actually when I was living in Oregon, I knew where the Godzilla movies were in I think it was a Hollywood Video, and I'm terribly dating myself with some of these references, but whenever we had the money to go rent a movie for a couple of days, I knew exactly where in that store the Godzilla movies were. And I was a kid at the time, so I generally went off of how cool I thought the cover art looked, because you're a kid. That's one of the things you judge those on. And I saw a lot of Godzilla movies. And I'm with you, the Godzilla suit, at times, man, that suit had a rough go of it at times. But it was so much, I think one of the things that part of the appeal of those movies is there's just so much kind of childlike joy that you can get out of watching giant monsters impossibly beat the dog snot out of each other.
Yeah, so much that they capitalized on the whole generation that grew up with Godzilla movies by updating things and calling them Pacific Rim.
They did, but yeah, Pacific Rim is the logical extension of that, in many ways more so than the Godzilla movie we got. Even though I like that movie.
The Godzilla movie was okay, but being the
too much Aaron
type
Taylor
of person
Johnson.
I am, not enough Cranston.
You have Bryan Cranston and Ken Watanabe. You're paying them to be there, and you decide to spend 90% of your time with Aaron Taylor Johnson. Come on now, who thought this was a good idea?
And the fact that watching it, I mean, it's a Godzilla movie, of course, but even watching a Godzilla movie now, you got to be when you see gaping plot holes in a movie, it kind of takes you out of it. It's kind of like I'm pretty sure you being the movie buff that you are and how attention to detail you are, I'm pretty sure there's a couple of things in that movie that just totally took you right out of it.
There were more the second viewing than the first. The first viewing, I just got to regress into a small child. Again, there's a few things that bothered me about it, like the notion of eating nuclear devices and despite all the abuse they take, somehow not, rupturing something and starting to leak radiation. There's whole sequences in that movie that just kind of go, wait, no, bad idea. But I'm not going to lie, the first time, there's that one sequence when the first time Godzilla's spines start lighting up, and being a big fan of the franchise, I knew what was coming. I'm not going to lie, I marked out like a little kid just before the first time he breathes fire at those things.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of nostalgia value in it. Don't get me wrong, but it's just like the monster that escapes from in Las Vegas. It's like okay, you have this monster progressively getting larger and no one noticed it till it just rips the side out of a mountain. Yeah, that's believable.
And someone would have seen that thing as it was growing, where it was stored with nuclear waste. Sorry, those chambers aren't that big.
So yeah, I mean, it was stuff like it. But yeah, like you said, the little kid in like our generation, just seeing Godzilla on big screen, unless you're watch the Matthew Broderick remake that no
That's not
longer
Godzilla. That's a
exists.
souped up T-Rex.
Yeah, that belonged in Jurassic Park, not in the Godzilla franchise.
I feel so bad about that movie because anytime I rewatch it from time to time because I feel there is some good popcorn value. And if you're feeling, and to be clear, if you need to fall asleep, put that movie on in the background. You're out like a light. I feel there is some merit to that movie. Most of it is John Reno being awesome. And the stuff in Madison Square Garden is actually a fairly decently done, kind of chase scene with tension and whatnot. But so much of it is just stupid. So much of it is just stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like I said, it was just the look that they gave Godzilla, rather than being the king of all movie monsters. They made him a T-Rex on steroids.
I found it completely appropriate how Godzilla handled Little Zilla there in the Final Wars movie. And if you haven't seen that, by all means look it up on YouTube. It's hilarious. And yes, I refer to him as Zilla because, as some people associated with the franchise put it, they took the god out of the creature for that movie.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. And any movie that has Sean Puffy Combs as associated with it, I just don't find in my wheelhouse.
Oh, yeah. Still on Godzilla for a minute or two here. Godzilla has an interesting kind of history in that the first couple of movies he's in, he is decidedly a villain. In the original Gojira from, I believe, 1954, he is by and large a metaphor for for the fear that comes about living in an age where man has access to, at that time, atomic weapons. Now we have slightly even more devastating weaponry at our disposal because, hey, why not, I suppose. Jeez. I appreciate, having the big stick that you never actually have to swing, but we're to the point where swinging the stick, alters the habitability of our planet. Not a nuclear proliferation discussion. But that's what Godzilla is in the beginning. He's just that kind of metaphor. And even in the second one, which I believe was him, it's Godzilla versus Mothra, I might have some of the orders on a few of these mixed up, so I apologize in advance to all the hardcore fans out there. But in Godzilla versus Mothra, he's still a villain. He is still, kind of a beast rampaging through he's not in Tokyo in that one, but that's the joke. He shows up and he wrecks Tokyo, and they have to get Mothra to come out and fight him, and he actually kills Mothra, which I found, as a kid, that's kind of shocking. You're like, wait a minute, Mothra's the good guy, and Godzilla killed him. Then Mothra's larvae show up, and they are able to defeat Godzilla, but he has, forgive the pro wrestling lingo, but he does the badass heel thing so well for the first couple of movies that eventually you just want to see him be a good guy. And it's an odd kind of, twist for the character to take as the movies progress, where now he's defending people from bigger and badder monsters, like Rodan or King Ghidorah, Biollante, and again, all of them, Mecha Godzilla. It's a really kind of an odd, arc for a character to take to start out that scary and that, evil in many ways, and then to have him become the protector of humanity by and large. Again, it's an odd path for a movie character to take, even a franchise character. My analogy has to be professional wrestling for that, because I can't come up with another analog in, even in movie franchises. Everyone is relatively static. So I'm curious, is there any, your thoughts on, Godzilla essentially turning babyface out in the third movie?
It was interesting because, like you said, he started out as the villain of the movie, and then he becomes basically kind of an anti-hero, and it progresses into him being a loved creature that saves Tokyo rather than destroys it. and it was one of the, like you said, the pro wrestling references. I guess it was one of the things that the quote unquote crowd turned Godzilla's face. And with that being said, they took him from the villain to one of the most beloved movie monsters, not only in Japanese culture but American culture as well.
Yeah, I was surprised, at how just because normally when there's a cultural difference, anytime you're crossing massive areas like that is sometimes difficult to interpret, to move over from one to the other. And for some reason, Americans love Godzilla just as much as the Japanese do. We love the big guy, and as a kid watching the monster battle sequences, I think in some ways sparked my love of pro wrestling, and maybe Shawn Michaels in particular, because they oversell everything.
Yeah, and also you can't get more interesting yet comical than the Americanized dubbing of the Japanese Godzilla films. When you see a Japanese man's mouth moves like he says 30 words, and next thing you hear is Godzilla, and you're just wondering what the other 29 words you said was.
Oh man, if for any of you who have never seen this or did as children and have no recollection of it necessarily, I believe a lot of these movies are on Netflix streaming. Just have a look, because even in a Mystery Science Theater 3000 type of way, these movies are funny, and there is some charm to them as far as that goes. All right, last thing on this, then we're going to move on to everyone's favorite giant ape. And do you have a favorite Godzilla enemy? You have a favorite nemesis of his?
Now, I have to stay with Mothra. I don't know what it was about Mothra. I mean, outside of the big crossover. I mean, I'm sure that you want to out of that realm. But I was a Mothra fan. That, and I can't actually remember the Metal Godzilla. I kind of like the Metal Godzilla. I think those would probably be my top two outside the major crossover.
I got a soft spot for Mechagodzilla. He shows up twice, and in both instances, he beats the crap out of Godzilla. I mean, Godzilla's a bloody mess, and then he hulks up and finishes the fight rather quickly. That's what Godzilla does.
Yeah, Godzilla's the Hulk Hogan of monsters.
No sell. Yeah, get beat down, get the crowd to think you're actually going to lose, then Hulk up, no sell, big boot, leg drop, fire breath, done. Collect paycheck. And it's not even my other one, and this is a slightly obscure Godzilla reference. I mean, again, King Ghidorah holds a unique place because he was so weird looking and very cool in many ways. But one of my favorites, again, not talked about very often, and in many ways for good reason, but there was something about Gigan that just kind of, I don't know what it was about, childhood me that found whatever the appeal was, but Gigan's kind of stuck with me throughout the years as one of Godzilla's nemesis that had some pretty cool weaponry at the very least. So, again, those would be my favorite. Now, again, as much as Godzilla is the Japanese monster, here in America we have King Kong. And King Kong is a very interesting character to look at, because for as much damage and destruction and death as he is responsible for, you always kind of wind up in the well done King Kong movie. You feel some degree of sympathy for the big lug, because he is pulled from his native environment and, for the amusement of man, shoved into a circumstance he should never be in, and he reacts badly to. And there's something inherently tragic about that. King Kong is very much a tragic figure in that respect. It was one of the things I appreciated about Peter Jackson's version. I think they got the character of King Kong completely right. Again, other things, Adrian Brody, the pacing, overly CGI dinosaurs. Okay, no, try again. But there were plenty of things I think they got right. Now, King Kong is the kind of quintessential American movie monster. Giant ape, likes attractive women, climbs the Empire State Building. What's not to be? It's very American, He's bigger than everyone else. He likes attractive women. He's in the greatest city in the world, and he causes the biggest scene he possibly can.
So he's John Cena.
I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna use that in the future. Yes. Oh man, that makes me sad. We'll never see Hogan and John Cena now. Just all over again.
Right. It doesn't make me sad.
They should just host that in Philly and have the crowd just boo the entire match. It'd be hilarious.
No, if they do that, if they did that, they need to put it in some like a obscure pay-per-view town, like not even a major market. Put it in like Cleveland.
Or Toledo. It's because as John Denver taught us, there's nothing in Toledo.
Well, they can't always play the old song, please come to Boston, and then have it just end up, please come to Toledo, because nobody cares about this match anyway. And
oh, that'd be something. Anyway, about King Kong then, I mean, there have been, quite a few movies, and they've all told basically the same story, and it's surprising to me that for some reason we still can't seem to improve upon the original silent film from, I believe, the 20s or 30s. I'll have to forget
33.
33, thank you. So, I mean, first of all, what is it about that story that we can't seem to... I mean, there are good parts to the version in the 70s. There's very good parts about Peter Jackson's. But what is it about getting this character right that is so difficult for Hollywood to do? And, what do you think about, again, the Great Ape as far as he goes on his own merits?
Well, I think the problem we have is the character of King Kong is, like you said, it's honestly a tragic character, but people don't want to take the time to see a character such as that. They would rather have King Kong beating his chest and destroying stuff rather than seeing what the actual character is and what it was actually meant to be, and that's basically transplanting, something like a magnificent creature, taking it out of his natural habitat just to be put on display for all to see, and the chaos that ensues when that happens. People would rather have I'm going to say this, and I want to make you and Mark proud by saying this, and also Sean Comer if he's listening. People like the Michael Bay approach to things when it comes to monster movies. They would rather see lots of explosions, lots of action, and nothing fleshed out when it comes to something like King Kong or a decent Godzilla movie, which we kind of got. But
we got a decent one. I mean, again, it's far from without its faults, but it's a decent Godzilla movie.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's the problem that people today have such a short attention span and don't want to see actual characters get fleshed out. They'd rather have nonstop action. The Michael Bay syndrome of nonstop action, lots of explosion, lots of boom, pow, yippee-ki-yay, and all that, rather than actually care about characters.
I weep for the generation of filmmakers that are going to be inspired by Michael Bay films. I really, really do.
Oh, you and I both are.
Because I don't want to be a crotchety old man when I'm an old man going, it was better in my day. I really don't want to be that guy. But if that's where we go, that's where we go, and it will be true at that point. All right. I agree with you about why King Kong seems to struggle so much. And again, Peter Jackson was probably not the best choice because that movie should not be as long as it is. It really, really shouldn't. And there are good things. The character of Kong, I felt they nailed. I like Jack Black in that movie, and I don't like Jack Black all that often, but I really enjoyed him in that. And I hope we get another one in the near future. I hope we get a version of King Kong that is good, is legitimately top to bottom good. I'm just not entirely sure we will.
Skull Island movie. They're supposed to be in talks of making a Skull Island movie, and it's supposed to encompass King Kong and not a direct form of Godzilla, but a Godzilla-esque character to also be in. It's pretty much going to be Jurassic Park meets the old King Kong, and it's supposed to be they're going to, from what brief synopsis I've ran lately, which has been in the past 6 months, is that it's supposed to be they find King Kong and everything on Skull Island, and it has 6 or 7 of the classic movie monsters that make appearance.
Well, you know what? I'm sure there's a segment of the population that will eat that up, and they're going to be hoping it's a large segment. Mostly let's be fair, mostly they're making the King Kong movie because they have to build to that epic crossover now that Godzilla's back and actually.
Yeah, the Godzilla movie was a success. Ultimately, we need to have a Kong movie that's a success.
Even though the size discrepancy at this point is hilarious.
Oh yeah, I mean, how big would Kong have to be to even compete with the Godzilla that we?
He doesn't have to be quite the same size, but he's got to be close. He has to be probably larger than half the size of Godzilla, I'd say. And then you can use, monkey agility to kind of compensate for the lack of size.
Which, if anybody watches Arrow, we're getting a pretty good King Kong ripoff on Arrow currently.
Haven't seen it. I keep hearing too many mixed things to decide to invest my time in Arrow.
I mean, not Arrow, Flash. I'm sorry, Flash.
Same thing.
Same universe. But yeah, they're doing a pretty good King Kong representation on Flash. That will be featured this week.
Does Edge start it? Because I know he's on that show now.
Well, no, he was only in one. He was in one episode.
The poor guy.
Well,
you can't keep Edge around. He's legitimately 6'5", and everyone else is like, I can't be next to this guy. He makes me look small.
Well, and what was interesting, they actually made Edge's villain character a size transforming villain who actually got bigger. So they kind of played up to the fact that he is 6'5".
Legitimately. All right. Moving on from those two. Those are, again, a lot of monster movie discussion begins and ends with Godzilla and King Kong, and that's for a very good reason, because they made such a massive cultural impact that we're still feeling it. I mean, the first Godzilla movie was in the 50s, the first King Kong movie in the 30s, and we're still talking about them.
And the influence they have on a lot of the movie monsters that you see today.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. What we're going to get into with some of these next ones is less going to be about kind of the size and scope that you get with King Kong or Godzilla, and more to do with both presentation and what goes into actually designing the creatures themselves. Because, look, Godzilla's relatively straightforward. King Kong's about as straightforward as you can get. You take a gorilla, you make it bigger. Godzilla's not that difficult to get right. Giant lizard, add spikes, breathes fire. It's hard to get it wrong, which should say something about how badly the Matthew Broderick Godzilla failed, that you take something so simple and still botched it. But when you get to stuff like, for example, the one I want to talk about next, the creature from Predator, and I want to talk about him in part because he relates back to the last show I did, talking about, invisible evils, because for a good chunk of that movie, he is, for intents and purposes, invisible. The Predator creature is a really interesting monster, especially the iterations it went through, which has some really kind of fun stories behind it. But Jason, I know you're a fan of the first. I haven't met someone who doesn't like the original Predator, and I mean, really, what's not to like?
Yeah, the original Predator's great.
It's amusing to me that a couple of the best slasher movies out there are not usually qualified as slasher movies, because that's all Predator is. It's a slasher movie, fundamentally, with a bunch of badass commandos instead of teenage girls. Same thing with the first Terminator movie. Fundamentally, it's a sci-fi slasher movie.
Yeah.
And they just don't get brought up when discussing that genre, which I find slightly amusing. But the creature there, I mean, I'm just curious because, I was talking to myself a couple of weeks ago. But so I'm curious for you. The movie itself, the fact that the creature remains basically invisible for so much of the movie, how does that play for you as a fan?
Excuse me. Oh, I think that it played into it kind of makes a play on your show from last week of the unseen terror and the human psyche, creating a lot more fear than visual representation. The fear of the unknown and the unseen, yet the ability to be controlled by it, basically, is uncanny. And that's what I loved about this, because you just kind of got little glimpses and little teases of what the predator monster actually is, and how it would basically stalk its prey. And it's something that we don't get to see much anymore. And I think it's partially a lost art in movies, that the movies like Predator aren't being seen anymore.
Well, one of the things that interests me about that creature in particular is there was because this creature went through a couple of different theoretical iterations. The earliest intent for the creature was to have it be played actually by Jean-Claude Van Damme, and it was going to be smaller than everyone. It was going to be, I believe, ninja-like was kind of what they were going for, and it just didn't work. Van Damme didn't like the suit. It was too bulky. Stuff wasn't working with it. So to the credit of everyone involved, well, if you can't do smaller and more skilled, you have to go bigger. So they made a giant alien that dwarfed Arnie. And Arnold Schwarzenegger's not a small man. Especially, 80s Arnie. He's huge. And now you've got this thing that's, lifting him up off of the ground, and so much. One of the things I appreciated about that movie was when they finally did reveal what it looked like, it didn't fall short of your expectations. I mean, again, obviously the tension is gone in that you can see it now, but okay, I can see it. It's still scary. It's still going to try to kill me violently. We actually have, believe it or not, James Cameron to thank for the facial design of the creature. The guy who designed it was actually, I believe, on a flight with James Cameron, trying to figure out how it was going to look. And Cameron's, they were sitting next to each other. Cameron's comment was, "I've never seen something with mandibles," and I think that would be pretty cool. And for all of James Cameron's faults, he's not without them. His instincts were right on, because when that thing takes its mask off, you're still pretty scared of it. It looks, completely not of this world, if it didn't before, and it still kind of taps into your primal fears of this should not be here, that wrongness about something that unsettles you. And then again, it's huge and it wants to kill you, and I mean, I have almost nothing negative to say about the design of that monster.
Oh no, I mean, like you said, it was the design was absolutely terrifying, with the mask and without, because I mean, it just seems like I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, there's nothing, and I guess that's a plus, because there's nothing that can compare to the actual visual representation that you see with the Predator. And the uniqueness is actually something that you can accredit to what makes it stand out and makes it terrifying. I'm sure we'll talk about another thing along the same vein here shortly. But yeah, the Predator was so crazy, and the guy that actually Kevin Peter Hall was who they actually got to play the Predator, and he's 7'3", and compared to Van Damme, that's a glaring height difference.
Van Damme is like 5'6", for those of you who don't know.
So, I mean, do you think it would have? Which do you think they would have used Van Damme in the ninja-like thing if Predator would have been as successful as it actually was?
No, I don't think. I think it would not have come across as well. I understand the idea behind going with a stark visual contrast like that, because you've got Arnie, Jesse Ventura, Bill Duke. That's not his name. I think that might be his name. I'm confusing him with the character.
Carl Weathers.
Carl Weathers. I mean, you have these large men, and there's two ways you can go with that when creating something in a visual scale to hunt them. You either go smaller and exponentially more skilled, or you go bigger. And it's logical to try smaller first, but with what they were dealing with at the time, which is, again, nowadays, if you were to do this, you would take a smaller guy, a Van Damme, a Jet Li, Tony Jaa, someone like that, and you would put them in a motion capture suit, and you would do it all digitally. And it could work. But when you had to put Van Damme in a bulky suit designed to be, the creature, a lot of the agility that you want out of your smaller guy is going to go away. It's just not going to look as good as a minimalist approach to a giant creature, especially in the 80s at that time. I think they absolutely made the right decision when they called that audible.
Oh, no doubt, because I just don't see the believability of something as small ninja-like actually being opposing to the cast that they had as the mercenaries.
It would have been tough, again, especially given that cast and how testosterone-fueled that is. And bear in mind, that's not natural testosterone in most cases. That's artificial testosterone.
Okay, in the same vein as the Rattler Broadcasting Network has, I just had an idea.
All right.
Expendables 4 versus Predator.
Oh, that would be hilarious.
I mean, you've got almost the same type of cast in the Expendable movies that you had in Predator, and maybe they have to call Arnold to save them.
Arnold has to show up in the helicopter.
Exactly. We have just made Expendables 4.
Oh, that would be awful, but it would be glorious.
It would be the most amazing train wreck of a movie ever.
To the unpaid intern listening to this, there you go. We don't even have to talk about it more than that. It sets itself up.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the cast in place. Only thing you got to do is find a believable Predator, and there you go. And then you can have Danny Glover just show up randomly and do a crossover and just say, I'm too old for this shit, and just bow out. Because, Danny Glover was in Predator 2, wasn't he?
He was. Oh, that poor misguided movie.
See? We could cross many, they love rebooting. Hollywood loves reboots. There we go. We just rebooted Predator and gave you a new Expendable movie all at the same time.
And Danny Glover has to kill Sylvester Stallone at the end of it for killing his partner.
Yep. Well,
Gets done, stops the monster. Stallone's the only one left. Glover looks at him, shoots him in the head, and goes, "And that's for Riggs, you son of a bitch."
Well, I mean, we did have Mel Gibson in the third Expendables, so here we go.
All right.
We are making movie magic here.
More so than a lot of the guys who actually live in Hollywood. All right, same vein as the Predator monster, another one that's pretty legitimately terrifying. The Xenomorphs from the Alien franchise. The first Alien movie is one of those things that, on the one hand, was very much a product of its time, because seeing that not old enough to have done this, mind you, so this is anecdotal evidence at best. People who saw that movie in theaters in the 70s and were legitimately terrified, there was something about that will never be recaptured in subsequent viewings. That being said, the movie still does a darn good job of scaring people, even 40 years later. And it's just a really, again, this one is a very well-made, very claustrophobic, very isolation-based horror movie. And the creature in that movie, its debut is so well done. The first time you see what becomes it, you have the facehugger form, and if you're even vaguely arachnophobic, that thing will haunt your nightmares. Then you have the chest burster sequence, and when you finally see its, fully realized form, it's great. It's a very, it's been talked about how much they drew inspiration from some of the works of I think it was Neil Gaiman. I've got that last name wrong. I know I do now that I think about it. But they drew some inspiration from original art that he had done. They made the thing large. They made it very exoskeletal, which is very odd for humans because we're all endoskeletal creatures, and all 90% of all large life forms on the planet are endoskeletal. So a large exoskeletal creature is very odd for us to look at and perceive. They made it slimy. They covered it with Vaseline. That's what gets that glossy and drooly effect. And it's large and it hides very well. It's creepy to look at, and it will kill you. It's another exceptionally well-made monster, from all the way from conceptualizing it on the paper to actually putting it on film in the final cut.
Yeah, the xenomorph is terrifying. It is the like you said, the progression you see of the xenomorphs.
I need to correct myself briefly. I should have remembered this off the top of my head, but the designer for some of these creatures was the artist H.R. Geiger. Just to correct my earlier guess.
Oh, okay. It's okay. We all make mistakes. But the xenomorph and the Alien movie is done right because you see the progression of and when you get the final reveal, it is just horrifying, and the suspense and everything that goes into it is just really, really terrifying. And it builds on the human, like we said before, the human psyche of what may come after you and what actually comes after you. That combination is great in the Alien movie.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that the well-done movies in the Alien franchise kind of play with, is evolving the creature a little bit. I mean, in Aliens, we get a lot of the traditional xenomorphs. We also get our, the Queen, who is, enormous and terrifying, almost more so than a lot of the other smaller creatures. Then there are times when that falls off the rails, like the canine xenomorph in Alien 3, or, heaven help us, the hybrid from Alien Resurrection.
Oh, we don't even talk about that.
I'm not entirely sure what possessed Joss Whedon to put a human face on a xenomorph, but he spent entirely too much time and money crafting that thing.
Just sometimes things go off the rails. Sometimes things just go to hell in a handbasket.
Indeed. But again, I really like the xenomorph design at its fundamental, at its basic level. It's great. It's human enough to be disconcerting on that level, and it's alien enough to be no, this is not a human. It does very well, climbing. It does very well in water. It's a great monster. Just from conceptualization to final print on screen. I mean, the other one we have to mention briefly as being just supremely stupid is the crossover, the hybrid, the Pred-Alien, if you will, from Alien vs. Predator Requiem.
Oh, that movie doesn't exist.
Oh, it does.
I do not know what movie you speak of, sir.
I actually prefer it to the first Alien vs. Predator movie. It boggles my mind how you get a concept so simple so wrong more than once.
Yeah.
But, that should have been... What you should have created there was one of the most badass monsters ever. And instead, it looks like you went to a graphic artist, still in, a local community college for the program, and said, mash these two things together. Just fails on every level.
Yeah,
all right.
It feels bad.
It should not look stupid. It just shouldn't look stupid, and you made it look stupid. And you should all feel badly about yourselves. All right, we're just about 2 minutes of live time left. Jason and I have a couple of more monsters we're going to run through. Just anyone listening live, I don't want you to be shocked in, a minute and a half from now we cut off live. There's a couple of other things we want to talk about. I have one in particular. He has one in particular. If you're listening live, thank you. I really do appreciate that. So thank you to everyone out there who is. All right. Next up, and I've got to bring this one up, as my personal favorite, I got a real soft spot for the graboids from the first Tremors movie. I will not discuss the subsequent reimaginings of 2, 3, because they're just bad. They're just bad. Much as I think their heart was in the right place for 2, and making them, bipedal heat sensors, it just didn't work quite as well. And then they get silly, which ought to tell you something if you're not familiar with that franchise. And then they get silly. But I mean,
that'd be a good franchise to be covered in a future October or Mark hiatus longer of Drew. And
I believe at the moment we have it kind of penciled in for October of next year. Though if at any point Mark decides he needs to recharge his batteries, I'm calling up Sean and we're jumping all over this one. Because man, that franchise, it's almost like Hellraiser in that, the first one, and in many cases, again, I like 2 in a lot of ways. Its heart is in such the right place, and it does such a great job of being romantic, not in the, human interaction romantic sense, but in the general artistic romantic sense, that it engenders such great feelings that you have. I can, to this day, watch the first Tremors and be completely happy, start to finish. You can also quote the movie start to finish, so there is that. Yeah, I'm bragging a little. Sorry.
Oh, brag all you want, man.
But, I mean, the graboid creature starts from such a fundamental premise. The guys who wrote the movie, one of them expounded on an idea that he had. He had just been hiking one day, sitting on a rock, and just thought to himself, what if I couldn't get off of this rock? Just the very basic premise of those monsters is, what if I couldn't use the ground, as I understand it now. And it's very simple. And then you just have to design a monster around that. Now, that's not always easy, and in many ways, the graboids are a tad phallic, but they do a great job of being a somewhat believable, threatening subterranean creature. I mean, they look kind of like something that could exist. I mean, they can't and they don't. But if you suspend your disbelief just a little bit, it's that's the kind of thing that might live completely underground. The individual tongues being, dare I say, semi-sentient, like snake extensions. Those things are great. Some of the sequences where it comes up out of the ground or bursts through Bert's wall. It's a really nicely realized monster that maintains its level of menace to the protagonist throughout the entire movie. And it's a little bit dull in color, but it doesn't need to be flashy and bright to get its point across.
Yeah, they drew a lot of. I'm thinking it was Dune that they drew a lot of inspiration for the graboids characters from, due to being like they're large worm creatures and they kind of in the same. It kind of has the same outcome as the movie Dune, as they go to these savior rocks, is basically what it's called, where they can't be attacked per se. So and like you said, this was a franchise that started off really good. I mean, the first Tremors is a good, in my opinion, a good monster movie, because I mean, it's practical. Like me and you've talked, anything that's practical is great. If it can actually happen, it adds to the fear factor, and if it's believable.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that bothered me, I think, so much about 5, which, heaven help me, I watched not too long ago. All the creatures are done digital, and it it bothers me. Really bothers me.
Yeah, the practicability of it adds to the movie itself.
When the actors have something they can physically interact with, it was one of my gripes about Jurassic World. I understand that there are sequences with the raptors that must be digital. All right, you cannot build a functioning raptor to run alongside Chris Pratt as he rides a motorcycle. I understand. Okay, there are things that you can't do with animatronics. But there are whole sequences in that movie that, give the guy something to interact with. And instead they have, a tennis ball on a pole and say, okay, look here for this one, look here for this one, look here for this one. And it bothered me, because that's one of those things that does. But yeah, the original, all those are all, I believe, those are all real creatures. They designed them. All of the tongue interaction is a real designed thing, either animatronically or some of them were just like hand puppets. The creatures themselves were just made and existed, and that adds a whole level to the what goes into the movie, and it's sadly a very lost art. You wanted to talk about the crawlers from the movie The Descent.
Yeah, they what a creepy creature. I guess you'd call them subterranean. Looks like a hybrid between a ill-formed vampire bat and a human that has became lacking the vitamin D and everything. On top of the claustrophobic feeling that the movie has itself, to add these creatures that can scale walls and maneuver in tight places with ninja-like abilities is just horrifying.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, I placed The Descent, I seem to recall, quite highly on my list of horror movies from the last 25 years. That movie is scary throughout its entire first two acts, when it's nothing but a claustrophobic kind of disaster story about, people going down, lying about where they're going when they go, spelunking, getting trapped in there. It's for that part, as just a claustrophobic, kind of disaster horror story, it works very well. It's one of the most claustrophobic movies I've ever seen. And then when you just think things can't get any worse, oh, by the way, here's these things.
Yeah, and the fact that, not only are you, I guess you're not only battling a outward physical representation, you got to battle the human psyche of the claustrophobic and downward spiral into madness. I mean, being trapped with no hope, and then all of a sudden they throw these ninja-like vampire bat creatures at you to deal with. I'm not okay with that. It's like I told you off air. I wasn't claustrophobic before seeing this movie. Yeah, I became claustrophobic watching it.
For those of you out there who are severe claustrophobes, I have to strongly urge you don't see this movie. It will traumatize you.
And those out there who have not seen this movie that want to become claustrophobic, I highly suggest that you do see this movie.
It's a great movie. I really like that movie. I just, as far as being a well-made movie, well acted, a good story that's told, I really like it. I just don't have enough of an opportunity to talk about it, I suppose. All right, Jason. Any others that we haven't touched on yet? Any final movie monsters that you want to talk about and throw out here?
The only one I would want to touch on briefly is I don't actually remember the name, but it's from Del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. I don't know. It's the thing with the eyeballs in its hand that.
Oh yes. I don't know what it's called. I think they just call it the Pale Man or something like that in the movie.
Yeah, that's the only other monster-esque creature I'd want to briefly touch on. Outside of that, I mean, I think we've covered pretty much the. Of course, we covered the two major. Then we touched on a couple personal likes that we have. So I think we've done a good spectrum here.
Yeah, the Pale Man is as they refer to him, played by Doug Jones. Doug Jones has a phenomenal command of his body. He does both the Fawn and the Pale Man in that. He's in a lot of Del Toro's work. He plays Abraham Sapien from the first two Hellboy movies. He's a phenomenally gifted physical actor.
Wow, I did not know that he played. That's a nice little bit of knowledge. But yeah, I mean, the roles, just those two roles in itself from Hellboy Abyss, the command of his body, extraordinary.
They redubbed his voice for the second one. David Hyde Pierce does his, I believe, for Hellboy 2, but physically that's still Doug Jones. My last one.
That's the only other one I would want to touch on.
He's a great. I watched that movie not really understanding. The first time I went into it kind of blind. I had heard just glowing praise for it, but knew very little about it practically. And then there he is. That's a creepy-looking dude. You know, he's tall, he's bald, and then there's the eyes in the palm of his hand. It's just a really... It just gets your skin crawling just a little bit.
Yeah, it's a real unsettling visual.
So much so, I don't know if you saw it, but I believe a couple of weeks ago for his Sketchbook Saturday, Benjamin Cologne did a sketch of the Pale Man from Pan's Labyrinth, and it's still freaky.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it looks glorious because anything Benjamin does is extraordinarily well done. So.
It's just reaching out for you. I mean, it's just, you know, a pencil and ink sketch, but it's still freaky a little bit. You know, it's reaching, you know, kind of like it's supposed to be reaching out of the page at you, and it's at the eyeball and the palm and the mouth. So, again, for any of you who are fans of his, and you should be, you can find all of his stuff. He posts those on both of his Facebook and Twitter accounts. I think he uploads them. I think he's got a DeviantArt profile as well that he uploads them to every now and then. So if you're on any of those, go back and find them. They're worth looking at because they're very cool. I think he actually got Doug Jones to favorite or retweet that one, if memory serves.
Nice.
Hey, when you work as hard as he does, you deserve the props you get. And bear in mind, he also got Paul Dini to respond favorably to his sketch of Harley Quinn a few months back.
Oh, Benjamin's just so talented. There's not enough words there. There's not enough words to describe how talented Benjamin is.
He turned Mark into Nelson from The Simpsons for an upcoming cover for the Mighty Ducks series on the Long Road to Ruin. I can't see that thing and not laugh because Sean looks so deeply nonplussed by being in a Ducks uniform, and Mark has the Nelson thing going on with the ha-ha.
Yeah, and the fact that Sean has to turn his Coyotes jersey over to beat it, so he has to wear the Mighty Ducks.
Oh yeah,
wow.
Yeah, the man does phenomenal work.
I'm looking at the Pale Man picture now. Wow. Yeah, I'm not sleeping tonight. Why did you suggest that I go look at that?
Because it's awesome. All right, I have one more that I want to add. As far as just the movie itself is okay, and it features Lance Henriksen, which is always good because Lance Henriksen. But if you haven't seen I want to say it's like 1976 or 78 movie Pumpkinhead. The creature that they came up with to be the actual Pumpkinhead monster is pretty darn freaky. Again, you have to account for some of the technology of the time and the budget, but considering those constraints, they created a really large-scale, very, very creepy monster. Made even more so when you understand kind of how it's created. And that deals with the narrative of the story, obviously, but even if you just see it for the creature, that's a very well-realized movie monster. Sadly, it doesn't get enough play, I feel.
Real quick, I got a funny story about Pumpkinhead. A girl I was dating, we rented Pumpkinhead on VHS, and there was a rather risque scene involving a trailer park, and we sat down to watch it, and her mother decides that she wants to watch it with us. So we just pop it in and hit play, and this scene begins playing out on TV, and it is one of the most gloriously unnerving things you could ever imagine, seeing a on-air sex scene with your girlfriend and her mother sitting side by side.
I imagine.
And forever I will be anytime I hear the movie Pumpkinhead, I think of that.
Well, that's a fun story. All right. With that out of the way, I don't think I have any other monsters that I feel like bringing up at this time, and I'm probably going to wind up revisiting this topic in the future, so I'll keep some in the bag for later on. Jayson, thank you for being here. What do you got to plug this week?
Always a plug being on here and getting to talk to you. Like I told you, I actually like coming on your show more than I actually like doing my own show, which you can find right here on the Red Legion Broadcasting Network, Tuesday nights at 10 p.m. It's called From the Cheap Seats, where I go off the rails talking about sports stuff, and my cohort Jesse Starcher tries to keep things under control. Which also you can find Jesse Monday nights on the Red Broadcast Network with source material talking everything you want to know or could imagine you would want to know about comic books. Outside that, I have nothing to plug, man.
All right. Real briefly, I have live coverage of UFC 193 tomorrow evening. Comes to the world live from Melbourne, Australia. This one's going to be big from a pay-per-view standpoint, from a live crowd standpoint. And I like the top two fights. I'm a fan of Joanna Jędrzejczyk. So sue me. So I will have live coverage of that over at 411 Mania in the MMA Zone. Stop by, say hello, follow along. I appreciate it. I'm sure there will be. Ronda Rousey usually brings out a lot of conversation from people, so that'll be interesting. This Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I host the 411 Ground and Pound radio show, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. We'll be reviewing UFC 193 and previewing the Ultimate Fighter Latin America 2 finale, headlined by Kelvin Gastelum taking on Neil Magny. Yeah, that card suffered some injuries. What are you going to do? Apart from that, I plan on being back next week. I wound up missing last week because Mark and Sean needed the Friday slot for the Long Road to Ruin talking about the Daniel Craig James Bond movies. And I am happy. I'm a team player. I'm happy to cede my spot every now and then when emergencies come up. But I will be back next week. I will figure out what I'm going to be talking about between now and then. I also have to double check what... I'm probably going to take the Friday after Thanksgiving off, but so if that's next Friday, then no, that's 2 weeks from now. Okay, so yeah, I'll be back next week. I got a couple of ideas kicking around. I will find something again. I might start tackling video game guys. I might take my first bite at Stephen King villains. I got all kinds of stuff I can choose from. If nothing else, I can spin my roulette wheel of evil and pick an actor best known for their villainous roles. So I know Alan Rickman is just dying to be discussed here on this show. All right. With that out of the way, everyone, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for telling your friends about us. We appreciate you, supporting us and trying to grow the network. It means a lot to us. I'll see you next time. And until then, remember, everyone, you need a great villain for your hero to overcome. So that if I could paraphrase, I believe it's from the Two Towers, darkness comes so that when the sun comes back out, it shines all the brighter. Until then, please continue to be well, be safe, and behave, and I will see you all next week.
So say good night to the bad guy.